Welcome to the Monday Monologue, and this week we're going to focus on a 300B tube. Something that I've talked about in the past, about that this has kind of been what I felt was an overhyped tube in hi-fi. And I think there's a lot of mediocre 300B amps that are being sold and people are buying based off of the magic that a real 300B or a really good 300B amp can sound like. And people have got the mistaken misconception that just because it's a 300B tube or the amp can run 300B tubes, that it's going to have that magic. And that's a real fallacy. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, you've watched me go through various iterations of 300B amps. And we started off with one where I used Edcore output transformers. And, that was like my original budget 300B. And I found that while it was okay, it just really didn't sound much better than my EL34 amp. And what really made me realize that was I had let a friend of mine borrow my EL34 amp at the time. And I think it was that 6SQ7 EL34 amp. And he really liked it. And then one of the tubes went bad. And so I said, hey, let me, I'll come over and pick that amp up. And I was trying to get his opinion on it, of just what he thought. And I said, let me bring over my 300B amp and I'll drop off the EL34. Or it might have been vice versa. It's been years ago. Anyway, he was like, I hate to tell you this, but that little EL34 amp sounds better than your 300B amp. And I was like, well, darn, that shouldn't be the case. That's supposed to be a nicer amp, And so that's when I discovered what putting these Tango transformers on does for a 300B amp. And then I went back and revisited that. And I had Matt at Musical Power Supplies wind me up some 20 watt 3.5K output transformers that were no screen grids. They're made single output tap, simplify the winding, hopefully going to be a really nice sounding transformer. And it just didn't do anything for me. I mean, it might have been a little better than the 25 watt Edcore, but it still wasn't even close to what these are. And I actually did a 300B output transformer shootout on the channel, and these were just like, as soon as you hook those up, it's like the numbers look beautiful, and the sound follows that. I mean, you can't always measure everything, but there was definitely something to this with that. And these transformers were designed to use with a 300B tube. That's what their deal is. That's why they exist. And so I decided, I did build that amp with the Musical Power Supply output transformers and their power transformer. And, I got it all finished and listened to it, and it sounds okay. I mean, it's not a bad sounding amp, but there's nothing special about it. And the problem is 300B tubes are super expensive. I mean, even like JJ ones are not cheap. You're going to have several $100s in a pair of tubes. And if the amp doesn't sound any better than an EL34 amp that has $25 tubes, like, what are we doing? It's why are we going there? And they make the same power level, and the EL34 amp puts off more heat. It's more efficient because it's a ultralinear pentode. This is my latest one that I built for a customer. He wanted to supply the chassis, so this is his chassis with this little joker and stuff. That's maybe not really my vibe, but hey, it's his amp. He wanted to build it custom just for him, so he did this little aluminum corner thing, which again I'm not super crazy about, but it works with this amp. I think it looks cool. Anyway, this was the first time I had ISO choke, and also used a custom made for me. I sent them the specs, and they wound this transformer for my specs to have the right voltage to work with my DC heaters, with the regulators, and all the stuff that I do. And this amp sounds crazy good. This is the best sounding tube amp I've ever listened to. And that's just no joke. And I finally feel like I've got a formula and not just the circuit, but all the parts with the silver wire in the right place, and the one carbon film resistor put in the right place, and everything, where the imaging and the tonality of this thing is just beautiful. And again, if you look at my website, you'll see there's an EL34 amp for sale, there's a 2A3 amp for sale, there's no 300B amp for sale, because this is the moment that I was waiting for to come up with a 300B synergy that matches the hype. And sadly, I think there's a lot of even $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, close to maybe even $10,000 300B amps that really don't do the tube justice. And I know it's me talking about my deal, which, yeah, you might go, yeah, right, it's your amp, but it's really, really good. If you live anywhere near the Atlanta area, you can hit me up off the contact thing on my website. You're welcome to come over and listen to it. And, well, I'm selling this one. I got to build another one. That's right, so wait. I got to deliver this one next week. But I've got all the parts to build another one. We're going to be doing this style chassis. That's going to be wood with splines in the corner. And that's kind of how we're going to be doing the back, but it might be a little different on the final production ones. I think we're going to move some stuff around a little bit, move them away from the corners, but it's going to be like that. And it's going to have this same layout on the top, where the power switch is going to be here. If you have a volume control, it's going to be over here. On the back can be RCAs or XLRs laid out like this. It's going to come with no tubes. I haven't figured out a price point yet. I got to sit down and look at what all the parts are costing and how much labor, because I'm having to get these top plates and bottom plates CNC machined and then take them to another guy to have them black anodized. And I think they look really great, but they're not going to be cheap. And I've tried coming up with a formula for a cheap 300B amp, and to me, there's no value there. If you need to be at a lower price point, go for a 2A3 tube. For whatever reason, the 2A3s seem a lot more forgiving about the transformers they're using. I think part of it is they have lower impedance, and they also run at lower voltage and lower milliamps. And so for some reason, there's just not as much stress on the system. And even like the PS Vane Horizon 2A3 tubes sound great. Their 300B tubes, they don't even hold a candle to what these Summit tubes sound like. And they don't make a Summit 2A3, so I don't have anything to compare it to. But I do have some EML 2A3s, and the Horizon tubes are close. The EML tubes are a little nicer, but again, it's a cheaper tube. You don't need DC heaters. The wiring's a lot less complicated. You just run a hum pot. You don't have to have voltage dividers and all this other stuff that you got to run with a 300B amp. So it's easier to build and wire up amplifier, and you get 5 watts out of the ones I'm building, and they sound great. And the other option is the my EL34 amp if you're on a lower price tier. I know people want to pay that $2,000 to $3,000 price point and have a Rockstar 300B amp, or be able to tell their buddies, hey, I got a 300B amp. You're ending up with something that has less performance just so you can say it's a 300B. And that's where the hype comes in. And I stick by the fact that that tube's been so overhyped, people aren't even interested in a tube amp that's not a 300B. But they don't want to pay for what a real good 300B amp sounds like. And the only reason that it got hyped was because somebody listened to one at this price point and quality level, and it sounded crazy good, and they're like, oh man, you should have heard this 300B amp I heard. And everybody in their brain just goes 300B, 300B. They don't understand that it was the synergy of the whole thing that gave it the reputation that it has. So stay tuned on this build. I'm going to probably be doing a similar version that's going to have a Habuer power transformer and choke on a metal chassis, the stamped or the sheet metal powder coated chassis. But I think there's some magic here with this full ISO iron version. And yeah, it's just going to sound better. So anyway, that's what I've been doing, is kind of working through the whole deal. And you've seen the videos that I've been doing about figuring out how I'm going to wire up this thing. And I feel like this is probably one of my nicest amps that I've ever built. And it definitely sounds the part. And I got my room sorted out where it's sounding as good as it's probably ever going to. I spent hours moving speakers around and finally got, I was moving the speakers a half an inch this way and that way, and it finally just like hit the spot and everything just clicked. And I taped the floor. I'm not moving the speakers. I think we got something that I can live with until I get my listening room done, and I'm probably going to leave that room set up like that just for casual listening anyway. Listening room's coming along good. They did say it's okay for me to share the design specs. And I'm not sure I'm going to share the blueprints and everything with everyone and do that deal. But I'm not sure the architect would be okay with that, because I still got to run it by him. But the sound engineer guys, Adam, I'll get it written down in front of me next time. It's up here. And there are links in the description. You can go to their website and check them out. We finalized on a 16 by 26 foot room with an 11-foot flat ceiling. And it was interesting when they were modeling, they originally thought that there was already a 15-foot wide slab out in the backyard. And they had that was the constraint. And so they were doing like a 13 by 17 or something room. Was way smaller than I wanted to build. It's not much bigger than the rooms that are in my house, except that they got a 10-foot ceiling, which is 2 feet higher than these are. But they were saying that the only way that would work is if the ceiling it was going to be almost a 2-foot slope in it. That it was going to start at like, instead of being a 10-foot, it was going to start at 9 and go to 11 or something like that. And I know that as far as construction, that's going to make things a lot more complicated, because then like every stud in the wall is going to be a different length, and somebody's going to have to figure that out. And ideally that the studs would then have a little angle on the top of them, so that and all that. And we talked about that, and it was explained that like if there's any way we can have a flat roof and it work good, So they went back to the drawing board, and they said they modeled about 15 different room shapes and sizes. And with this 16 by 26 room with a flat roof at 11 feet, they said everything just clicked. And the door It's going to have a 3-foot door on one of the long walls at the back of one of the long walls, 3 feet from the corner. And they said that worked out. Great place to put the door. They were like, if you put it in the back wall, it just screws the whole room up. And it's interesting looking at some of the sound rooms that I've seen other people build, and they have doors either in the back wall or they have them in the side wall right up near the front wall of the room. And they were like, yeah, that doesn't work. So I'm glad I hired these guys, so that simple things that seem simple like that can be a total screw up on the acoustics of the room. And we've settled on likely going to do a 3-layer wall system. We're going to do a concrete backer board, 1/2-inch plywood or OSB with 5/8 sheetrock on top of that. And there's going to be green glue between the concrete backer board and the plywood. And they modeled that and said that should work great. And that should simplify the construction. And then the wall will be, it's still going to be thick. It's still going to be almost between the exterior wall and the interior wall. It's going to be like a 10-inch thick wall. But yeah, that's what it takes to get the resonant frequency of the wall low enough for this whole thing to work like I want it to. But back to the ceiling, they were saying that if they sloped the ceiling in this larger room, it made the center seat in the listening area marginally better. So it did help a little bit, but it shrunk down the sweet spot in the room. And by going to a flat roof, the seating area where people could hear good sound expanded a bunch. And hopefully we're going to be able to they were modeling this with the speakers 10 feet apart and the seating position about 15 feet from the speakers. And then they're going to be almost 4 feet from the front wall and 3 feet from the side wall. And of course, that's all up in the air. And they said with this flat ceiling that it also made the speaker placement not as critical. And so you can experiment moving that around in the nodes, and the room treatment isn't going to change. That's one of the key things, is if you have the room set up right or acoustically good, then when you change the speaker, you're not chasing the room treatment placement with the speaker chase placement, if that makes sense. Like, if the room's weird acoustically, and it's probably why moving the speakers in my room I have now is so hypersensitive, is the room's so whacked out sonically that you move the speaker a 1/2 inch and it changes what's going on in the room. Where hopefully my new room is not going to be as sensitive, so you can dial the speaker placement in to where the speaker wants to be, where the imaging's really good, and you can play around with the whole width of the speakers to create the strength of the center channel or the phantom center channel that a stereo makes. And so I'm super happy with the direction we're headed. So I gave them the green light to keep going with that. We need to order the door, and the door's going to be kind of stupid expensive. And it's probably going to be a pair of doors. There's going to be an inner and outer door, and the inner door is going to be the sound door, and then the other door is going to be an exterior rated door. And we got to figure that out and get that ordered. And so things are starting to happen. Still waiting on the surveyor. My architect's on vacation. I'm just really hoping by the end of August that I can have like the plans done, so that I can start pricing out the contracting and figuring out like how much is this going to cost and how much over budget I'm going to be, because I'm sure I'm going to be over budget. And it could be the kind of thing where we're going to stub out the plumbing and have to put that in at a later date. The workshop area is going to be on a crawl space, so if we have to do the plumbing later, that's not a big deal like it is if you have a slab. And then the listening room is going to be on a slab. And I think what I'm going to do with the electrical, because putting the wall boxes through this specially constructed floated wall and everything, like you can't nail them to the studs. That won't work, because then the box is touching the wall and that negates all this rubber floating clips and stuff. So what I think I'm going to do, and I got to talk to an electrician and see if this is up to code. I'm afraid it probably isn't, but to run the cable or the Romex through the wall and surface mount the box on the wall, because it's going to be that 3-layer construction that's going to have a 1/2 inch of OSB that the wall mount box can be mounted to. And that way the only penetration through the wall is just the hole that's that big that the wire goes through. And yeah, I'm sure some of you guys are electricians, or you're going to comment like, you can't do that. But anyway, that's what I'm kind of hoping for. And the other thing with this wall and ceiling construction, I'm going to be able to do that linear LED lighting that's going to be around the whole perimeter of the room. So there's not going to be like a ceiling light fixture. There's going to be like all around the whole perimeter of the ceiling, right at the wall, are going to be these LED tape strips and these extruded aluminum channels that like wash light down across the wall. And so all the walls will just be kind of glowing. This kind of warm LED strips that I'm going to be using. So I think that's going to give it a really nice feel. I think part of the magic is going to be picking the right color and not getting too dark, but also not too light. And I'm kind of thinking a forest green might be nice, but that might be too dark. I don't know. I got to think that through. I definitely don't want a bright color, and then, going to put some art and stuff on the walls too. But anyway, that's kind of where I'm at with the room, and I'm really happy that I think this room's going to be big enough where I can use like almost any kind of speakers, and it's going to allow me to really push the capabilities of some of these higher powered push-pull amps that I haven't been able to do in the past, and play around with some lower efficiency speakers, and hopefully have a nice place to demo my gear and listen to gear and all that stuff, plus the workshop area, which is going to be really nice. And we hadn't even started kind of figuring that out, but I wanted to get the listening room stuff sorted out first. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. I've been staying busy. And I know I haven't done just a huge amount of content this year, and there's been projects that I was promising that I was going to work on, some different push-pull amps and stuff that have just kind of got put on the back burner. So one thing was get caught up on these things. Like I said, I've got another 300B monoblock build that the guy's been waiting a year on. And I talked to him today, and he's still cool. He's like, I'm not in a hurry, but I want to get all those builds that are people put deposits on done, and then get this room stuff figured out so I can start. I'd like to get the slab built before the weather gets too cold, or get the slab poured and get at least the foundation work done before we get into freezing weather, because then, you can't do anything. And then you get the whole winter. It's not that cold in Atlanta, but you don't want to be pouring concrete if there's a chance that it could freeze. So anyway, that's what's going on. And that's what I think about 300B amps. And these PS Vane Summit 300B tubes and this 6S and 7, they're what I'm putting in these amps now. I've tried, just did a video about that, but yeah, they're the bomb. I'm just super impressed. And I can't wait. They're supposed to be coming out with a 2A3 next year. And they've got some other tubes on the way. And they're supposed to be sending me some prototypes of those soon. So we should have some new PS Fane Summit tubes here to review. But yeah, they're not cheap, but hey, sometimes you get what you pay for. And in this case, that is absolutely true. So anyway, I think we're close to 23,000 subs. So that's cool. I was hoping to hit 25K, but hey, I was kind of lax on making content this spring, so I can't cry too much. Hope you're enjoying this content. Hope you're enjoying some of this new stuff we're doing. I know some of it may not seem that different, but I'm telling you, this build of this 300B is something special. So, again, thanks to all you folks that have been watching my channel forever. Thanks to all you new folks that have subscribed. Thanks to you Patreon supporters. People who have joined the little member thing. I see quite a few more people have done that. That's cool. That helps the channel. And folks that are buying my gear. Yes, I'm still in business. Yes, I'm still building stuff. I've got phono stages for sale. I've got somebody just ordered a color preamp. I've got chassis and parts and stuff here to build EL34 amps and 2A3s and all that stuff. And these high-end 300Bs are going to be for sale soon too. So anyway, thanks for watching. We will see you next week for the Monday Monologue.